I think it's Stanislavski that said acting is behaving truthfully under imaginary circumstances. So if you just take that sort of concept and give it to any show that you're doing, what we do on stage, it's all pretend, of course.
Yes.
But you're living to make it sort of come to life and deliver that reality for the audience. Trust your level of commitment and your pursuit of the realistic circumstances of the show and the scene and all of that. And I guess that's not a very formulaic view on acting, whereas a lot of people are like, I do my Ivana Chubbuck 12 steps or my Stanislavski an actor prepares. I guess if there was a technique that I would identify with, it's Meisner, because I do quite like taking the focus off me and putting it on my scene partner. You know?
Welcome back to another episode with the Dive Podcast, where each week we interview professional performing artists as we discuss their stories and dive deeper into learning how to navigate the challenges we face as artists. I'm your host, Taylor Scanlon. I'm a musical theatre performer and also yoga teacher and sound healer at the Australian Yoga Academy, where we film our podcast. And today we have Nigel Huckle in the studio with us, who is currently in Miss Saigon, Australia. And it was awesome having him in. In the episode today, we talk on topics of the voice, any tips on how to maintain your voice throughout your career. We also touch on acting and any tips on how to learn your lines and what it takes to fully commit into a role. It was a pleasure having Nigel in. I know you're gonna get a lot out of it. So as always, grab a journal, grab a coffee, and let's get into it. Well, thank you for being on the show, Nigel.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
We're so lucky to have you in today, and I'm so excited to talk to you and hear about your stories and give people basically what they want, which is lovely.
I'll do my best. Do my best.
So before we get into some of the topics on the voice and acting, I'd love to go back and paint a picture for the audience of where it all started for you before your career.
We'll have to make like a whole episode out of this one part. But I was born in Australia.
Yes.
And then my dad got a job in Singapore when I was about 3, so we moved there. Then my parents split up and my mom remarried an American. And so we immigrated to the US in about 1998. I was 8 years old.
Yeah.
And soon after we got there, I'd always sung around the house as a kid, like Whitney Houston was my jam. Wailing as like a 3-year-old, 5-year-old.
We love.
And then my mom was like, there's this audition for a musical. It was like our equity house, like professional house in the hometown that I had moved to in Virginia.
Sure.
And I sang My Heart Will Go On by Miss Celine Dion. And I did a scene with myself from the movie The Borrowers.
I love that.
I know. I was literally just talking to myself, like I would step sideways and then be the different characters. P. Green and Arietti.
That is like giving me nostalgia in my brain.
Oh my god, decades ago
Yes.
now. Honestly, crazy. And I got the job. I was one of the Lost Boys in Peter Pan. And so yeah, I was 8 years old, and that's where my sort of step into theater began. But I did all my schooling in the US, and then I was deciding on whether I wanted to be an actor, because in high school I was taking voice lessons and I was part of this performing arts ensemble where it was pretty professional. Like we had recitals a few times a year. We had a big main stage review that we did every year, and I did that for 4 years through high school. And then I was deciding, like, is this what I want to do? I don't know. I kind of want to be a lawyer as well.
Oh, wow.
And I had a friend actually pull me aside in high school and was like, you have to do this. Like, you have to be a performer. You can make a career out of this.
Wow.
And I think for someone to believe in me that much, like someone else, I was like...
That wasn't necessarily like in it, or...
Yeah. I mean, they were a dancer and they'd see me perform, but I think just to have that sort of push from someone, and my mom was really supportive as well. She was like, you have your whole life to make money, quote unquote, but you only have right now to follow a dream. And
well, sometimes it only takes that one person to just give you that plant a seed in your head and you're like, oh, maybe I can.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then so I did a BFA in musical theater at Shenandoah Conservatory.
Cool.
And that's where my training and real investment in the profession sort of began.
Great.
Yeah.
And what was it like for you training there? Or how long were you there training?
It's a 4-year bachelor's in the US. I loved it. I loved it. And it's funny because when I was auditioning for universities, I only auditioned for that one and for one other one that was like my absolute dream to go to. And then I didn't get in, but I found out that I got in early in the first place that I applied for, and I got a talent scholarship as well.
Oh, good.
And I was like, well, maybe this is the sign. And as soon as I started, I was like, there's no other place that I have to be but Shenandoah. And
destiny.
yeah, I loved it. But oh my God, you like go into theater school thinking you're like amazing. You come from high school and you're like, I'm the best.
The number one.
And then when I didn't get into the musical freshman year, I was like, oh.
What do you mean?
I was like, oh, so we're really starting at the bottom and now we're going. And I was like, not a good actor when I started college. But I loved my conservatory experience and music, theater, singing, dancing, like it was all the boxes, and really learned to read music as well. And I loved it. I would do it over again.
That's so good. And so you only basically then trained in America? You didn't train in Melbourne or Australia at all?
No. If you had asked me in high school if I would ever move back to Australia, I would have said you were crazy. But my mom moved back here while I was in college. And then I worked for a year and a half after I graduated. I did like a resident company at a theater in Colorado. And then I was like, well, I could move to Australia because I've got the passport. Why not?
Yeah.
And it was sort of like a Christmas visit without a return ticket. But at first I was like, what have I done? Because I had been working pretty regularly in the US. And then I landed here and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to book the first thing that I audition, like no problem. And then it took like 3 years for people to really know who I was.
Yeah.
Because I had no
time.
background here, you know? And I didn't go to any of the major schools in Australia. So I didn't have that chance to build a network or anything.
Yeah.
So it just took years of going in the audition room for people to learn who I was. You know?
And well, now you're definitely in the industry in Australia.
Which I'm so thankful and feel very welcomed, and I love being in Australia, so it feels good.
What was the first show you did in Australia?
Well, the first show maybe ever was an opera called Harvey Milk, and that was in like 2014. And then someone saw me in that, and then they put me in another opera called Spanish Time, and then it sort of just tumbled from there, I guess, you know, like people had seen me in something and said like, come in for this, or, you know, which is how it works when people talk about like, oh, the dirty word of networking. It's like, well, it doesn't have to be dirty. It's just show up and do your best work, and people will recognize that and,
for sure,
and bring you along.
Yeah. When we had the episode with Luca, she was talking a lot about trust. Like the panel need to trust you, need to know who you are and where you come from and what you can bring to the table. So,
and I resonated with that completely. I was like, oh, she's so right, because like that's how careers really take form.
Because it's a big job to not only be casted, but to be given a role to, you know, sustain and to really look after and to make sure that you're doing the role at its, you know, peak, or what it's meant to be doing.
And it's not just the skill and talent, it's the how can you lead a company and how do you appear on media and all that sort of stuff. Like all of that is factored into whether or not you book a job.
And you learned that along the way?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I mean, that's not really something I guess that you learn in university, is how to appear on camera. Where I went to school was cool in that we had a subject called preparation for the profession. So there was a unit on learning about the business. And I did have like a bit of a leg up, I guess, when I left, being like, oh, okay, I know where I want to make it work for me.
That's interesting, because I don't feel like they have that in Australia.
Yeah.
It's
there's quite a lot of things, like we had stage costuming and we had stage makeup class and stage lighting, and we were building sets and we were focusing lights, and there were entire semesters dedicated to each of those subjects. So you don't really do
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Because as well, even if you not even per se wanted to not be an actor or a performer, there's like all these other avenues as well within the arts that you could do.
Exactly.
And to, I think as well, you learning all of those different backgrounds of different departments, you probably respect them even more now.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what they have to actually go through.
Yeah, you know what it takes to sort of build a set and take one down as well. So there's different levels of theater in the US, and before you join the union, you work non-union, and when you're non-union, you could be asked to do anything. And when you're on a non-union contract, usually you'll strike the set at the end of the season. So it's just stuff like knowing how it's built and how you can take it apart and where it goes and taking down the lighting fixtures and stuff. Like, that's such an important part of theater training in the US that I'm glad I was able to bring here.
Yeah.
You know?
No, that's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely would be able to understand a lot more than us performers that are here in Australia, for sure. And so then you went on to lead a company. Was it West Side Story that you did the first time?
I did, yeah. Which is funny how it worked out, because in 2019 was when I auditioned for it. And it was the last of about 8 final callbacks in a row that I was at. And I didn't book the job at first, but I was sure I booked this job because I heard that the person I was up against didn't get it, and through the grapevine. And I was like, oh my God, my agent's gonna call me any second.
Things change every second.
And then I got the call and I answered the phone and I was like, please don't break my heart right now. And they were like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, you didn't get the job. Like, I'm so sorry. And they sent me donuts. They were like, I've never given a client a gift for not getting the job. So it's funny that didn't work out at first, but then because of how I did in the audition, there was an opportunity later for me to be the alternate for the Canberra season. So they rehearsed me in, and then just the way that things happened, I was one of the alternates for Sydney as well. But then it was supposed to do a return tour, and then COVID happened. And then when it was time to do the return tour, they called me back to play the role full time.
Yes.
So, you know, it's just, you never know how things are going to work out like that. But yeah, 2021, that was my first opportunity to sort of lead a company in a commercial tour in Australia.
I think I saw that show. I think I know where was I? Brisbane? Did you do in Brisbane?
Perth and Brisbane was what I did.
Yeah,
yes.
I saw. That's the probably first time I saw you.
Yeah.
Singing all of the things.
Oh my God, that was a hard job actually.
Yeah.
I think I was so in a space, especially after COVID, where you put a lot of pressure on yourself to deliver perfection, which is completely unattainable as a performer, and arguably not as exciting as just letting yourself do what you do best and letting it happen. But I remember just that B flat in Maria just always annoyed me.
Right.
And I would go to the music director's office and just be like, I need to sing the option line. Like, I need something different. And he was like, well, they're paying to see the B flat. They're coming, so like, let's make sure. And that was a few years ago. And now I think if I were to go back and do that show, I would do it how I want to do it.
For sure.
And feel confident that I could bring. But it wasn't easy. It was like a mental slog doing that show. But I think I've definitely overcome that sort of block.
Yeah.
You know?
And now Miss Saigon, which is just an amazing show. We were just talking before, I saw it 3 times when I was in Melbourne, and now it's about to go overseas.
Yeah.
Are you really excited for that?
Oh my God, I can't wait.
Because you've been to, is it Manila? You're going to first?
I did Les Mis in Manila and Singapore in 2016. And Manila's amazing. I always say it's one of those cities that you can get in a bit of trouble and it's okay.
Okay.
But that aside, the people are amazing. The fans are incredible. Like, the reception of the shows are amazing. But Miss Saigon is such a part of Filipino culture because of Leia, and obviously that what she did for that show. Absolutely. And it's the first time the show's been back in 24 years.
Oh, wow.
And this year's the 35th anniversary of the show, and Leia was the last one to do it.
You're not going to get back.
I think our run is pretty much sold out, and it's like 9 weeks, and you know, we just extended for like the last possible time, and I can't wait to. It's going to be electric.
Wow.
So,
I mean, your introduction to Miss Saigon actually was a while back, wasn't it? Didn't you? Yeah.
It was in that job that I did just after I graduated, so 2014. I played Chris at a small dinner theater called Midtown Arts Center.
Dinner theater.
That is now
dinner
closed.
Dinner and a show.
Exactly. And we serve the tables as well. So, you know, you got a base pay of like, I think it was $325 a week. And we were housed. And then, so you would serve the guests like before the show. And then about 10 minutes before, you're like, okay guys, like, anyone need anything else? Because I'm going to go get in costume and I'm going to go on stage. You do the first act. Interval is dessert time, so you're still in costume and you bring out dessert, and then you leave everyone with their bills. And you know, because I was playing a lead, they tipped quite well.
Oh, cool.
So you make money on top of the base rate and doing the show. And so I don't need to do that experience ever again. That was sort of my first exposure to the show, and loved it. Obviously at a much lower budget, much smaller scale, but it was still professional. And so I think that definitely helped when I went in for this audition, just to have the music in my bones. So the lyrics are quite a bit different, some of them nowadays.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that would have been obviously really special coming back to the show.
Yeah.
In Australia as well, performing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it did feel like coming home in a way.
And good that you kind of knew the show as well, so that it wasn't super out of context. You could actually really be here and really enjoy it for what it was.
Yeah. And what was crazy about the process of getting the job was I was living in the US at the time. I'd moved back to the US.
Yeah.
And, you know, my agent called in like November of 2022 and was like, hey, you're on a short list of people that are interested in playing this role, but you still have to go through all the rounds and stuff.
Sure.
So I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get hired from the US, but fine. I sent my first round, didn't think about it, and then I moved on with life, as you do. Middle of January, I had like a Zoom live callback. I hired a studio in New York. And
gosh, those Zoom callbacks.
But I did it, and I was like, that was one of the best auditions I've ever done. But again, how are they going to hire me?
Yeah, you never know what they're looking for.
And I didn't know when the final callbacks were. I was like, when am I going to hear?
That was probably good for you that you were kind of not fully here. It was just kind of something you were touching in, and
I just gave it my best.
Attached to.
But then in 2 hours, I had an email that was like, hey, we're so sorry to ruin your weekend, but we have to put you on a plane to Australia tomorrow. So
literally the day after the
day
Zoom?
After. Yeah, the Zoom was Thursday night. I was on a plane Friday afternoon.
Cancel all your plans. You're going to Australia.
and I had like a weekend reunion planned with like my 3 best girlfriends from college. And we hadn't been all together in like years. And I was so looking forward to that weekend. I was actually quite disappointed because I was like, oh my God.
Because it was to come to auditions, right?
Well, it was to fly for final callbacks,
right.
You know.
But it wasn't like you've got it, you're coming here.
You know,
you were kind of still
I was like, I'm so sorry, but like, I have to go to Australia tomorrow and I can't come to this cabin weekend.
Wow.
You know. So landed Sunday morning, work sessions Sunday night.
Straight away.
Sessions. Yeah. I think I took like a 4-hour nap because I was still jet lagged. You know? Monday morning, more work sessions, and then Cameron McIntosh was in the room Monday afternoon, and then I was back on a plane to New York on Wednesday.
Yeah, he's a funny man.
Oh, I had a great time. You know, I was a bit nervous because it's like the boss.
This is why you're here.
Yeah, I had a few moments outside where I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And then I was like, no, hold on. You were brought here for a reason.
Yeah, and it was probably kind of good that it was rushed because you probably didn't have time to think about it.
No, not really, you know. And it wasn't super, like, formal audition process. It was just a bunch of work sessions and going in and out and pairing with Abby and pairing with Carrie. And it was really, really a lot of fun. So,
that's awesome. And now you're going overseas and you just did a run in Australia as well. What was that experience like for you? And working with Abigail as well.
Well, it's amazing because Abby is 19 and she's so powerful.
Yeah.
And just seeing what a 19-year-old with her life experience is capable of bringing out onto the stage. And she's not someone with formal training either. She's been in voice lessons for ages. But I'm like, oh, I've got a BFA. And she's like, I was on my first year of law school. And suddenly she's turning out this powerhouse performance.
It's really,
as Kim in Miss Saigon.
It's really outstanding.
Like, it's mesmerizing to watch, and also to be opposite her, and because the show requires so much commitment. It's that kind of story that if you don't fully commit, it can seem a bit unrealistic or far-fetched. Like, how did this sort of story come together? But it's all about the commitment, and she is just always there and just pouring it. And you know, as someone who's got quite a year, many years on top of her, to sort of watch that and be part of it is inspiring.
Absolutely.
You know?
Going into more your kind of like routine and how you look after yourself being a lead, is there anything that you do ritually? Do you have your set rituals, or are you kind of just see what the day brings? Or
I thought I was a ritual person.
Okay.
And then I sort of had discovered that I like having my days free to do what I like. I am not someone who's like, I need to catch up with this person on these days. Like, I do quite like to have the days of shows to myself. But there was something cool about being in Sydney where you go to the beach in the morning and then you go do the show at night. That was wild. Like, I'd never had that experience.
I think I don't know what episode it was. Maybe it was Carly Davis, and we were talking about that, like, actually working in Australia, one of the best things is when you're, say, on Broadway or you're in London, you can't, in between shows, even just, like, go to the beach or, you know, do something on, the same
lifestyle.
day, or a whole lifestyle.
It's unmatched. Like, it's awesome. I think in terms of, like, things I do to preserve my voice, I try not to get too tied up on it. I'm not like, oh, I can't have coffee after this certain time. There's certain things that, like, I won't eat super close to the show because, what that does to reflux or what have you.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I try not to let the show sort of take control over my life because it's a job and I'm there to do the job and I'm there to enjoy it as well. And I'm there to enjoy the whole experience that comes with it.
And I guess you're different every day as well.
Yeah.
So each day you're going to be required something different.
Yeah.
Even though the show's the same, but you personally.
Yeah. And different every city, actually, because in Melbourne I really struggled. And I think it's because of maybe the pollen or something. But for the first few weeks after opening, I had swelling on my vocal folds. So I had to take 2 weekends off of the show, which was so boring. And then the ENT had me on like a staggered return plan. So I did 5 shows one week and 7 the next week, and then was back to a full schedule by closing. And I was like, oh, what's happening that I can't get my voice in check? And then when we went to Adelaide, I didn't miss a single show, so...
Come on, Melbourne.
I know, I'm like... But it's sort of those things that you have to, I guess, relinquish control and relinquish, like, the sense of defeat or...
Yeah. Well, I guess there's some things that you can control and there's things you can't, so...
Absolutely.
There's no point worrying about what you can't.
Yeah.
Going into talking about acting through song...
Yes.
I know we were talking just recently about in Australia there's a lot of, I don't want to say pressure, but a lot of focus on you're going to acting class and you're doing just solely acting, and then you're going into singing and you're just solely singing, and dancing vice versa. But what we're seeing is there's a really big missing link in acting and bringing them all together.
Yes.
Kirsten King always says acting and, music and dance coming together, she says, to bring it all together. So I would love to know your experience with learning how to act through song and any tips that you can give on that topic.
Well, it did start, of course, with basic acting without song. And again, when I started in college, I was a terrible actor. Like, I got a C+ in my basic acting class, and I was like, what on earth? And I'm not someone who really resonated with, like, this is your objective, and, this is what you're going after, and these are the sort of tactics that you're using to get that objective, because I'm like, I'm just thinking about how to say the words, like, how am I building this sort of subtext underneath? But I think as I've learned through my career, is acting is how much of a level you're willing to commit. And because I think it's Stanislavski that said acting is behaving truthfully under imaginary circumstances. So if you just take that sort of concept and give it to any show that you're doing, what we do on stage, it's all pretend, of course.
Yes.
But you're living to make it sort of come to life and deliver that reality for the audience. And I think, as I was saying before about a show like Miss Saigon, that story is so... It could be very real, because it is historical fiction, in a way, but the twists and turns that the show takes are quite out of left field, and so you have to be able to commit to that story. And I think when you're singing, that commitment comes not just from, like, how you're delivering it, dramatically, but how you're giving it musically as well. Like, the music paints a picture too, where there are accents, where there's dynamics, and what you want to build in as well, especially in a sung-through show like Miss Saigon. Yeah. And I think also when you're on stage with someone too, it's so much about listening as well. Yes. I did a masterclass. It was like a screen masterclass during COVID from Les Chantry. He's, he's like a film actor and teacher, and he says this quote about an actor listens with their blood. And I heard that and it just clicked for me. And acting isn't just about what you're singing, it's also about how you're behaving when you're being sung at or being part of a scene.
Yeah, because I guess if you're just focusing on what you got to do and you're not really
listening. Yeah, exactly. And so I think I find a lot of challenge and I find a lot of focus in listening to what's happening across from me. And then that informs your next delivery and
how you react and respond. And
so I think it's just levels of commitment to the story. And I guess there were times where I was like, what do I do with my hands? And
that's a big thing, especially I don't know, a lot of dancers.
Yes.
You know, even with singing, we all just like want to move and
and I
crazy.
think there's room to sort of forgive your mind of like bringing that up, because that same masterclass that I did with Les, he was talking about actors who correct themselves because that wasn't very like human, that wasn't very realistic of me. And it's like, well, you are a human and you did that, whether it's on stage or on screen or in rehearsals or whatever. Therefore it is a human act. So you can find other ways to do it, but you can sort of forgive that sense of not knowing what to do with your body or your hands, because it's a discovery.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess a lot of it is subjective too, because I could be watching you and you're doing something and I'm like, what are you doing there? And then someone else would be super captivated, or, you know, so it's really hard, or putting a fine line with where you even position all of it. Yeah.
And even in rehearsals for this show, you know, we were in tech and there's this part in the hotel scene where I was like doing a lot of stuff with my hands, and the swings are all watching during tech. And one of the swings mentioned like stuff with your hands. And I was like, oh wait, are my hands like doing weird things? He's like, no, your hands are beautiful. Don't think about your hands. And I'm like, okay, you're right. Okay, I couldn't let that stuff go. So I think we think and manifest a lot more mentally and psychologically than actually appears.
Yeah.
And it's just, if that's coming from your delivery, then it is. And trust your level of commitment and your pursuit of the realistic circumstances of the show and the scene and all of that. And I guess that's not a very formulaic view on acting, whereas a lot of people are like, I do my Ivana Chubbuck 12 steps or my Stanislavski an actor prepares. I guess if there was a technique that I would identify with, it's Meisner, because I do quite like taking the focus off me and putting it on my scene partner. You know?
That's great.
Yeah.
And going into scene work and even memorizing lines, I know with being a lead, you have lots of different lines.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you do in the process, even pre-rehearsals or during rehearsals, that can help you learn the lines faster or get them out of the paper into the brain?
Yeah, I mean, if it's really complicated, I have sort of mnemonics, or I'll remember like the alphabetical order or whatever, you know. And I think I did hear another guest say, you know, they have tricks where they put letters or whatever.
Everyone does it different.
Yeah.
It's just, endless ways.
Yeah. But I would say, and this goes for auditioning as well, like I heard a director say, when they get compliments about like, oh wow, how'd you learn all those lines? And it's like asking a chef how they boil the water. It's sort of something that you have to do.
Yeah.
And you know, you and I know that as professionals, but I think when you're younger or starting out, you're like just so daunted by like, I have to learn all these lines, and it's like, you have to learn the lines.
Yeah.
And
repetition.
And you will learn the lines. And when you learn the lines, you'll go and slay whatever it is. You know? But like just learning the lines is the first step, and something you sort of just have to get used to if you want to.
And I guess if you're nervous with that, just do it more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly,
just like anything.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Letters, alphabetical order stuff. I'm not someone who learns by rote. Like I do learn sort of a rhythm to spoken word. So I will often notice if I've said the line wrong because it didn't fit the time or fit the rhythm that I've learned the line in, you know? So, yeah.
Great. I love it. Well, I know that you've had a lot of experience in the arts, and like we said, you're about to go overseas. I always love asking people at the end of, or near the end of the podcast, about advice that you would give yourself if you could go back to the beginning of your career, you know, just about to start in the industry. What advice would you give yourself?
Just to be patient, which is so hard, because you think you want to start straight away and you want to just book everything and make lots of money and buy a house or whatever it is and like have a massive career. But I had a career that I was really proud of in my 20s, but it didn't go like I imagined. But by just staying the course and being persistent and patient with how it was going to develop, you know, in a way I had less control than I usually do in an audition for getting Miss Saigon. You know, that was all just people I'd known before and the work that I'd done in audition rooms previously. I was out of the country. So you can't have a grip necessarily on
all of it,
on your career. You have to sort of let it flow, and if you want it bad enough, and if you know you have what it takes,
you'll do the work.
You'll do the work.
Yeah.
And you'll persist and you'll persevere, and it's just about the patience.
Were you not as patient when you were starting, do you find, or?
I think in sort of maybe like my early to mid 20s, I was like, I have to book everything that I go in for. I just have to. And you know, I played a lot of roles in regional theater in the US. Like, we have quite a big regional theater culture over there. So, you know, and played roles when I was younger professionally. And I think when I would go in for auditions for like really big things, if it wasn't the right fit, I'd try to like push myself into the box of like, you know, oh, I will make this extreme of my voice work. And then sort of in my late 20s and now I'm like, I know what I fit and I know what I do well. And I know if I go in for that audition, I'll smash it. But if this isn't the audition for me, I'm just in there to say, hello, thanks for having me. This is the best that I got. And it was great to meet you. See you later. See you on the next one.
That's it.
You know, but it takes patience to figure that out. Yeah.
Do you teach at all? Like, if people wanted to work with you, are you
I've kind of always wanted to teach. Like, I'm really keen on coaching.
Yeah.
I think I would quite like to do that.
Cool.
I just don't play piano. That's the only thing. But there are tracks out there. We can do it.
Yeah.
No, I'm really interested in coaching.
Yeah.
Because I love teachers. Like, I got so much out of my teachers in my career, and I feel like they've really filled my cup. And where I've gotten to now, I would love to sort of lend that to other people.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, great. We can put your handle, and if you have any questions for us or Nigel as well, you can email us at info@thedive.com.au.
Yes, please do.
Yes.
Please do.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming.
Taylor, thank you for having me. This has been awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for listening to another episode with The Dive Podcast. If you have any questions for myself or Nigel, you can email us at info@thedive.com.au. As always, if you enjoyed the episode, you can like, rate, leave a review, comment, and message us. And as well, if it resonated with you and you feel like this could help someone else, share it with a friend. And if you haven't yet checked out our website, www.thedive.com.au, you are missing out. Weekly, we upload content on there, free content to help you as a performer. And this is knowledge not just coming from decades ago in the industry. This is knowledge and tips and tools and techniques that are being used now in the industry. So if you haven't checked it out, please go and head there. And of course, we have all of our other episodes that you can go and binge watch right now. Why not? And until then, I'll see you on the next one.